Now, the entire purpose of the federal aspect here, this is a federal hate crimes trial. So a lot of new details came out about the horrific things that were said, all based on race. The goal to prove that Ahmaud Arbery was killed simply because he was black and literally hunted down by 3 white men in that Brunswick neighborhood. Let's go ahead and bring in 11 Alive legal analyst Paige Pate to dig deeper into the legal aspect of this. Thanks for being with us this morning. Now, we saw that deliberations only went on for 3 hours yesterday when the jury got the case. Started at 9 a.m. this morning. Here we are at 10:42. Let's talk about the timing and just how sure they were with all these guilty charges.
Well, the timing of the verdict and how short the deliberations were really suggests to me that they didn't have a problem at all with the government's case here. I think ending the case very strong with the prosecutors reminding the jury about those horrific text messages, social media posts, left this jury very upset with these defendants. So normally, even in a case where there's going to be a guilty verdict, if you have 3 defendants and multiple charges, the jury usually takes a good deal of time to go through the evidence, go through the legal elements, and reach a verdict, a unanimous verdict. Didn't take much time at all for this case. So that to me suggests the prosecution's case was very strong.
And we're talking text messages they went through, social media posts, and in the comment section. So a lot of people think these things are closeted in some regards, but these were very public displays. And we had text messages of William Bryan saying that his daughter had just started dating an N-word. In regards to the MLK Day parade, Travis McMichael referred to it as the monkey parade. A lot of these details were new and were not mentioned in the state trial. And so as that was coming out and just hearing these things, like he said, it seems like the jury was pretty riled up. And let's talk about the jury. We had 8 white people, 3 black people, and 1 Hispanic juror, and we had 3 white alternates. What message is this sending, especially for hate crimes, pretty hard to convict?
Yeah, I think the message here is crystal clear. I think the federal government, by pursuing this case, and they got some criticism for doing that. I mean, these defendants had already been convicted of murder and other charges in state court. They were going to spend their life in prison regardless. But the federal government said, look, this is a priority. We want to send a message that not just the murder was wrong, but the reason they did it was wrong. And so I think given the makeup of this jury, the fact that it comes from a mostly conservative South Georgia district here, rural people, some small town folks who got together, and even with that background, even with that conservative bent, found that this was just too much to tolerate, and they would not let the racism go unpunished.
From the legal aspect, let's talk about how long it took to get here as we have the charges pulled up right now. We're talking interference with rights, attempted kidnapping, and using and carrying a firearm. We see Travis McMichael, the one who we know, pull the trigger with that shotgun, ending Ahmaud Arbery's 25-year-old life. Guilty on all 3 charges there. His father, Gregory McMichael, interference with rights as well, that attempted kidnapping and using a firearm. And also we know that it was William Bryan. It was his truck that was used to, so to speak, his form of a weapon. The prosecution and the defense really went back and forth about the fibers from Ahmaud Arbery's shirt being found on that truck. And that's where William Bryan comes in. His text messages and history of using racist language was also a heavy focus here as well. And as we look at the charges, you know, I think it's really telling. It took 10 weeks just to get an arrest. So now we have the death of Ahmaud Arbery, February 23rd. That is tomorrow, 2 years to the day, 2022, taking nearly 10 weeks to get an arrest. And now we've had convictions on the state level and now the federal level. This is a really strong message, Paige Pate.
It's a very strong message. And I think everyone needs to remember, not only did it take some time for any arrest to be made, but for the release of that video, we wouldn't be talking about this case. There would have been no state trial. There would have been no federal trial. This case would have been completely swept under the rug. But for reasons no one has quite figured out, the initial lawyer for Greg McMichael thought the video was a good thing, and they released it. And obviously, as a result of releasing that video, it came to the attention of leaders here in Georgia, across the country, across the world, really. And that reaction led to the two prosecutions and ultimately to the verdicts that we have today. So it's an amazing turn of events that went from the incident where Ahmaud Arbery was killed to what has finally happened today.
And now we talked about, the fact that pursuing this on the federal level, you mentioned that, hey, why would you do this when they're already facing life in prison? And then some of these charges also face the possibility of life in prison. I think that is a really important aspect, too, especially for the family. We've heard, Ahmaud's father, Marcus, and we've heard Wanda Cooper Jones say, hey, it doesn't matter. We are in this fight for the long haul. And they've been really, really adamant about saying we want justice across the board 100%.
Yes, I think the family certainly got what they wanted, and clearly it's been a struggle. Ahmaud Arbery's mother has, almost single-handedly pursued this aggressively to make sure that justice was ultimately achieved for her son. But it's not just important to the family. I mean, I completely understand why the current administration, the Attorney General said, look, even though these folks are going to be spending life in prison, it's still important to bring these hate crime charges, to get a conviction, because it's not just about Ahmaud Arbery and his family. It's about this community. It's about the way we're going to deal with cases like this. And I think the community here in Brunswick benefits from this verdict almost as much as the Arbery family.
And I think it's also telling not only there with the community, but this was national. We can all get those visuals of May 2020 with people in the streets of Atlanta and just the amount of anger and frustration that was boiling over during the height there of the social justice movement. We have the case dealing with civil rights in regards to George Floyd with the additional 3 officers happening in Minneapolis. What do we say about all of these cases happening together in the fact we know what 2020 symbolized?
It really is a sea change. I mean, things are so much different now. I mean, I've been practicing in federal court for over 25 years, and it used to be the federal government would occasionally bring hate crime charges if they thought the defendants, whoever committed the crime, were not being prosecuted at the state level or not prosecuted properly at the state level. Not so anymore. And I think people now realize that if you commit a crime like this, not only is it going to be prosecuted, it's going to be prosecuted as much as it possibly can be, to the fullest extent of the law, both state, federal. And obviously from the reaction of the jury, the very quick verdict, people are ready for that change. And I think we've seen it in this case. We've obviously seen it in the George Floyd case, but to me, this case hits home more than George Floyd because of the jurisdiction that we're in. And I don't think we can emphasize that too much. I think it really is significant when we had so many people show up for jury duty that questioned even the reason for a hate crimes charge in this case. To see them come back after listening to this evidence sends a very powerful message.
And historically, hate crimes charges have been very, very hard to get convictions on. Why has that, really been the case? And I think in this day and time, I can almost bet that your response is going to have to do with social media. We heard so many horrific details here, things that you don't think people even say in 2022, but all of that was really uncovered. The veil has been lifted for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're these defendants and you're listening to this trial, I mean, you're thinking these things that you said are never going to be, displayed publicly in the light of day. Obviously, if you put stuff out on social media, it sticks around. And in a case like this, it shows exactly how these 3 people felt, what they thought, and why, in this case, they committed the crime that they did. Hate crimes charges are traditionally difficult because you have to show more than just hate. You have to show more than racial prejudice. You have to show that was the motivating factor for the crime. But here, I think the evidence of prejudice was so strong and the circumstances of this offense so clear that the jury didn't have a problem with it at all.
Hopefully this is causing a lot of people to question their hearts and if they're carrying any hate in their heart, and just how detrimental some of those decisions can be, life altering for these families for sure.